The folks that are born today have no idea what my life was like. They didn't ever live without a refrigerator or without electric lights. And maybe I could give them a picture of what it was like in my early days. My parents were both positive people. They were always for you. So I think they would be positive about this. I portrayed everything as it did happen, and I think they'd be pleased that it was recorded, that others could see what we went through during the war, for instance. It was a bad, bad time for our country, for the whole world. And I think they would approve.
The value of Meemaw's book would be to get a look into her, where she grew up and what she did before I was born. Ever since I've known her, she's been Meemaw, so she's been there with everything that goes along with her. She's such a good listener. She lived with us for a while, and we would come in the door. She'd always want to know what you were doing that day and everything that you had that happened to you that day. So that was always her as a grandma, and I never really knew her as a working mother, as someone with kids, raising young kids, raising all of my aunts, and I never knew her as that person. I always knew her as Meemaw.
My daughters encouraged me. I had, through the years, written bits and pieces of things that happened to sort of get them straight in my mind, and they saw the writings and mentioned, why didn't I write a book? And it sort of intrigued me, because I have always liked to write and enjoyed writing, and I loved my family, and I thought of it as a way I could tell folks about my family and my life.
And God's love is all around us, like a warm and gentle breeze. Let us share this awesome wonder and rejoice in each new day. For we know that every moment God is showing us the way. We will find all the strength and the comfort that we need, and God's grace will be our reward.
Aunt Lois was a hero. My dad and I sometimes had some different reasons, and she would explain to us, not all my dad's fault, some of it's my fault too, you know. And she had that way about her. She could recognize the situation and, you know, work it out for both sides. And she did that for me many a time with my dad. She put down in this book a lot of things that had escaped my memory was brought back. It was an excellent book. She remembers so much that I had forgotten until I started reading the book. And actually I read it twice, because the first time you read it, you go over it. The second time you read it to remember, you know, a whole lot of things you've forgotten, you know. So it was an excellent book, and she remembered so much about it.
Before I retired, there was a shift in focus on primary sources for research, and I think when you can see a time or an event through the eyes of someone who lived through it, you get a totally different perspective than you get from a history book. It humanizes history, and so that history is not just a lot of facts, it puts a human face on those historical happenings.
I got started by reminiscing about my early years, and it was a long time ago when I wrote the paper, and I stuck it aside, and now and then I'd add bits and pieces to it. And my granddaughter Holly was spending the summer with me one year, and I got it out and she saw it and read it, and I said, I wish it was typed, because it was written in longhand and on various pieces of paper. And she said, I'll take care of that, and she did. And it looked pretty good when she finished typing it up for me. And I kept it, and then little by little, I had other pieces I had written. And when I made the decision to try to bring it all together, then I got serious and started writing the different chapters about the different parts of my life.
It was cool to see her just spend so much time on it through the years that we were living with her. Her writing, it was just kind of inspiring to watch her be so dedicated towards a task and then see it to completion, with now holding the physical book of all her hard work, and then to know that she put so much time and love into writing about her life. It's going to be exciting to read. We would see her writing it on the kitchen table, and she'd have out her notepad, the spiral bound, and she would write, just writing pages and pages. And every once in a while she would come back and say, I have another chapter done, and another chapter done in the book. And I never thought that it would make it this far to publication and pictures and the whole thing. So I'm excited to see it done and read it.
Lois was a good writer, and I think she wrote a lot during her life. She wrote poetry, and I think probably her appreciation of poetry made her a better writer. What comes across the most to me in the book is how strong Lois's voice is. When you're reading the book, it's like you're sitting in the room with Lois telling you those stories. It's like I'm just listening to her tell me these stories. And those wonderful family stories, coupled with all those photographs, just make for such a wonderful gift for her family and for anybody, I think, who wants a little better understanding of the human experience, maybe through the eyes of someone who lived in a different era. And it's a treasure, so thank you, Lois. I just wish the book had been about 500 pages longer.
We had physical work that had to be done every day. There was no skipping a day. The cows had to be milked. The animals had to be fed. We had to gather food, prepare food. We had to gather wood for heat. And now you can go to the store and buy almost anything if you have the money. And there's not nearly the strenuous things that we had to do. I started most of my tasks when I was 6 years old, and I didn't finish them till I was 18 and left home. Mentally, there's more of a stress on people than there were when we were growing up. When you carried the wood in, you were finished for the night. Now, there's all the extra things going on that really pull at people's minds, and you're not nearly as comfortable. In fact, being tired is good for you. It helps you to rest. If you go to bed tired, you'll rest a lot better than if you go to bed worried and upset.
It's really cool to get a look into her life as someone who grew up on a farm and without cars, all the different things in North Carolina, because the old place as I know it is a place where we go for the reunions, we go to camp, and it's this house that's still standing, but that's that's the place that I know to be the old place, but I'm excited to read it and see what it's like as a home and how it was to grow up there without a car and without, without electricity and that kind of thing.
There's in there so I can choose.
I hope that we don't give up on the kind of experiences that we've had at the farm and that we come back as human beings and see each other face to face. But her book will give us a snapshot of what it was like, because who would believe that you could raise 6 children to adulthood with no electricity and for a long time no running water, and your refrigerator is a spring house that's 150 yards away. And Lois worked right along with the boys. I mean, she was a farm girl and she did what the boys did. And of course, I'm sure Grandma depended on her to do some of the things that were women's work back then. And so she participated in keeping this family going. And what a pleasure to see in her own writing what it was like from her perspective.
Grandma, she talked a lot about how our ancestors were strong and upstanding people. And I was very confident that I came from good bloodlines. While none of us were rich in monetary ways, we were rich in dignity, in intelligence. Yes, we were. We were intelligent. We had talents that other people didn't have. We were looking forward to our future because we all felt like someday we would be the grown-ups in the family and we would have children following us and grandchildren. And I've got them.
It's so cool because she's had such a long life through so many different decades that there's just so much that we can learn from her. I think her work ethic has always been really strong, and then her love for her family. There's so much we don't know that I don't know personally.
I think the book helps keep the family tradition alive. I think a lot of us, it was like me, they forget things about it. I think by Kevin keeping the house here and keeping us having the family reunions every year, I think that and the book together has kept our family together. A whole lot of families has come apart over the years because they go away from these family traditions, like the reunions, things like that.
We were never allowed to be disrespectful. There was no big deal made about it. You just respected the elderly people. You expected your teachers, your managers when you got a job, and that discipline carried us through. I've always said children need fences, children love fences, because when they come up to a fence, they know they got to stop. They can't go through it. So Mom and Dad set the goals, how far we could go, and we followed them, and it worked.
Lois was a matriarch. She was a loving person, but her word meant something. She had a good sense of humor. Lois was the key to my mother meeting my dad, her brother Maynard, because Lois and Mom were classmates at Oak Hill. And Mom would come home with Lois, and of course Dad was back from the war, and they met each other and fell in love and got married.
There's some stories, some of the classic stories, particularly from Maynard. Maynard was such a good storyteller. I remember some of those, but a lot of Lois's experiences were unique to Lois, and it, being the only surviving daughter in that branch of the family, you got a different perspective than you did from the men folks' tales. So, yeah, I learned several new things.
Once upon a time, right out here under the cherry tree, her and my Uncle Paul was talking to grandfather Ed about drinking. And Lois had this thing, if you took a drink of liquor or a drink of wine, you was wrong. And Paul was a deacon in the church, but he believed if you took a drink of wine, you was all right, as long as you didn't get drunk and didn't abuse your family or, you know, become a drunkard. And I was very interested. I was about 12, I guess. And what my grandfather said, and he was a very brilliant man in my book. He said, Lois, if you take a drink and you're that strong against it, you're in the wrong. Paul, if you can take a drink and not become an alcoholic and not abuse your family and keep a job, he says there's nothing wrong with it. And through the years, I've lived with grandfather's word, you know. They all formed a great team here. They was all well, they loved each other, and they got along good now. At times, they like any other family. I know Lois sometimes would get upset with her brothers for not doing exactly what they wanted, and she'd pretty well set them straight. So that was it.
How nice for someone to take the time to get those stories in your head and then put them on paper to pass that along to the next generation, because with each death you lose so much history that you'll never get back. And so Lois has gifted her family with stories that will pass on for generations. So maybe more of us need to think about what unique stories we have and maybe think about writing them down like Lois did. Lois was an inspiration.
Don't hesitate to encourage those you come in contact with. You don't know what a person is facing. They may be irritating to you, but look at them and really think that they may be hurting, and try to help them if you can. And that's another story altogether. Think of other people and how you treat them. It makes a big difference in what comes back to you. Believe in yourself. You are the one that is responsible for what happens to you. And if you don't like what's happening to you, then learn to change it. But don't expect somebody else to come along and do it for you. You have to set your own goals. And goals are very important. Even if you don't make them, it's good to set them. And you won't always make them. Nobody 100% accomplishes what they set out to do. But set your goal high and understand that if you will stick to the job, you can do it. And trust the Lord will give you the strength to go through. We all need something to lean on. And whether you're a strong believer in God or a small believer, you can lean on him. And I know he's carried me through. I know he carried our family through. And I know that whatever happens to you, it's not really what happens to you, it's what you do about what happens to you that makes a difference in your life. And just keep going forward and believe, I can do it.
I think it was very fun being able to realize how they lived like back then and how she lived and how she had to walk from school to home and from home to school and back. And yeah, it was really fun.
The book gives all the details and brings them together from one end to the other. And it showed friends and relatives. I think it's wonderful the way she wrote it together and included so many people.
And that's it.
It's awesome.